Hello, welcome to my cubicle on a Friday afternoon. This is the audio department at Flight School Studio in Dallas. And this is another installment in our live stream series on the making of Flight School's Manifest 99 virtual reality experience. I'm going to be up front right now. I'm just going to be reading a lot, kind of like a robot monkey or something, but I have a lot of information to impart, so I don't want to leave anything out. I am Frank Pittenger, sound designer at Flight School. I've been a part of the team that created Manifest 99, and I'm here today with Katie Wood, who's on the Flight School development team. I work in Pro Tools to do the sound creation, and she has implemented my audio in Unreal Engine 4. So today we'll do a two-part demo and show you how we did this by describing our work on this one scene. It happens to be the first thing you see when you put on the headset in Manifest 99. I'll play the finished scene back for you as it is in the game and then deconstruct it, building it back up sound by sound to show you how I did that. We'll pause after my portion, and Katie will then show you how she pulled that audio into UE4 to place it into the experience. Okay? So what is Manifest 99 anyway? It's one of the coolest things I've worked on, I must say. It's a beautifully rendered, interactive story about finding redemption in the afterlife. It is in this kind of in-between world. There's a character who has some unfinished business, and it's a little murky by design, and I'm going to leave it at that. It's really up to each user's interpretation as to the meaning. It's got multiple layers of meaning. You don't have to use a controller in this. It's gaze-based, so it contributes to the virtual reality experience. You don't have things in your hands that you're having to control. You gaze at one of a murder, and I did say murder of crows. That's a flock of crows that follows you around on your journey on this train. You're on a moving train through most of the experience along with these four other travelers. It's available on Steam, Oculus, PlayStation VR, and HTC Vive for only $5.99. It's well worth it. And also Manifest 99, this is brand new, just this week received the Juried Independent Award at the Future of Storytelling Summit and Festival, along with a lot of positive reviews, so we're really happy about that. This is part of a series, as I say, and a couple of weeks ago, the composer on Manifest 99, Barrett Lewis, discussed his role on the project, and I encourage you to go back and take a look at that. If you go to YouTube, there is a Flight School channel, Flight School Studio. You can find the archive and watch all of them. Barrett and I worked particularly close together on aspects of the sound. He wrote the score for it, and I think he did a great job of describing what the co-directors Bo and Adam were looking for in terms of atmosphere. Sound design plays into that also. It really affects the emotion of any cinematic experience. But in VR especially, I think realism plays a big role. I function to help pull the viewer into the story realistically. And when I say real, I probably mean hyper-real. It's kind of an idealized reality, if there's such a thing. But bringing the viewer in and helping immerse the viewer into that experience is part of my job as the sound designer. The sounds of the train just help pull you into the experience. Even if you haven't been on a steam train, which is what this is, it's a vintage train, I feel like the sounds put you in that environment. And if you have been, I feel like it's pretty real. One of the things I wanted to do was make sure I had a set of high-quality multi-channel recordings of a train of that vintage. I've worked on projects before with vehicles, automobiles, for example, where I can kind of get away with mixing models, for example. I can use a Toyota passing by, but then maybe use a Nissan door slam. And most people aren't going to be aware of that unless I'm doing a car commercial. In this case, though, we're so close, we're so connected to this train, I felt like I needed a complete set of sounds because we are on the train a good part of the time. The train's moving, we're inside, But then sometimes we cut to the exterior, and I need to have a moving train from the exterior perspective. We have the train slowing down. We have it passing by. All of these things at different speeds. And so I found a set of train sounds I really like. At the same time, I don't just drop them in, because when we're dealing with an idealized setting, the train, although quite real in a lot of respects, is still animated, and it moves at a faster rate than a train normally would. So I work in Pro Tools, which is really still a linear workflow. When I do commercials or film, there is a static place on the timeline. There's one place where a sound exists, and I'm able to do a mix, and those sounds stay where they are. But this is interactive gaming, so I have to approach it a different way. Katie, who you'll hear from soon, would play as we moved through this process. Katie would play the game and capture audio and video at the same time, recording the gameplay, and then would give me a QuickTime video, which I placed into my Pro Tools timeline and worked building kind of a mock-up. It wasn't the final product, again, because I would be handing her the individual sounds, but I build what I expect for everything to sound like in the environment, and then at that point, when it gets approved, it goes out as individual sounds. So I'm working to this capture, and I want to show you now what I received. This was the first piece of video I got. This was done early. I'll play it the way I received it, which is without sound at all. Okay, so let me play you now what we ended up with. This is what you'll hear in the experience. We'll get to know the scene pretty well playing it back a few times. So that's one of the best parts of my job, is taking a beautiful piece of video like that and applying sound. Let's look at this on a track level. The first sound I found was perfectly serviceable as a train approaching a station. You'll hear it now. It's fine. It's a little thin, a little flat, not that much to it, but it does serve as a bass sound. You may have noticed that although it fades out, that train is continuing through the station, going beyond. It's actually passing by. It's not approaching and stopping. So I found a sound that to me masked the fact that the original sound doesn't stop, and this is what that sounds like. That original sound crossfaded into an idle train. The next sound is one that I think enhances that original sound. It's kind of, the first one is from the perspective of some of the cars down the train a little bit. Because this is a steam locomotive, I wanted to get some of the power of that steam-driven engine, and therefore have that prominent, at least when the train begins. So this is the piston, the steam-driven pistons added to that sound. Okay, building it layer by layer. I still wanted to have more texture, more sounds of movement, so I found 3 sounds that I think indicate movement and add a little more sonic variety. The first thing you hear is a steam radiator. All right, that banging sound you hear if you live in an old apartment building. I found a tow truck with an electric winch. And maybe they sound out of context. They sound like you wouldn't associate this with a train. So how does that work? It's I'll tell you in a moment. The next sound is a steam-powered tractor. I didn't think it sounded big enough, so I pitched it down. All right. Yeah, so I do search. I've got a big sound library, and I have a database called SoundMiner that I search for sounds in. And at the beginning of the process, I start throwing things against the wall to see what works. I search all kinds of mechanical sounds. I don't limit myself to train sounds. And so I come up with some unlikely sources. Let me play for you now the combination of what we just heard. So somehow I think all those sounds work together. I don't know that for sure when I find them. I have to get this big bin of sounds and then try them in different combinations and use what works. So now we need to think about the train stopping. The steam power not only pushes the train forward, but it stops it. They're steam-powered brakes. So I found a set of steam-powered brakes. Really just steam blasts that I think serve that purpose, and added to that, how about some metal on metal, some squeaky brakes. We have this door opening moment. I didn't have anything by itself that I thought worked, so I used a combination of sounds, just some rattles and some sliding. The second one. And the third one. Together, they sound like this. Okay. And we can't forget this sound when we're dealing with a train. Okay. And now everything so far, you'll hear it. Starting to come together. I'm going to add something else that sometimes we forget about, which is a kind of low-end rumble. When you're standing on a platform like this, you may not be aware of hearing the rumble. You kind of more feel it coming up through the platform in your shoes. It's more of a visceral experience than it is auditory. If you're listening through earbuds or computer speakers, you may not hear this so well. But this is it, isolated. Almost an earthquake sound. All right. So let's add that to the whole thing. Add some power, I think, to that sound. Okay, so that's the train. There are these moments in the experience when, as I say, you gaze at these crows. You have to look them in the eye. And there's a sound that always happens. There's a crow warp sound that takes place. I'll just play the crow sounds by themselves. Okay. And one other train sound. This is a whoosh as it comes by. Nothing special by itself, but it adds a little texture. Okay. Now that's the train and the crows kind of in space. They're not really in an environment. I need to put them in a place, and this is where I can convey emotion sometimes better than anything else. I found a kind of a sci-fi rumbly ambience. And I added to that a desert wind. That I thought sounded kind of creepy. And then On top of that, a music pad, kind of a suspended cord. Gets creepier and creepier. Not sure where you are. Alright, so that places the train in an environment. Well, I'm going to play the whole thing back now. This is the composite of all the sounds we just heard individually. It sounds like this. Voila. As I say, this is a kind of a demonstration of what the final sounds will be like in the experience. I've got the panning. You probably noticed that the train starts over on the left and passes by and leaves or pulls away to the right. There's some reverb here in places and some delayed sounds which are motivated by the environment we're in. All of those things are going to go away because they're best handled in the game engine, where you find 3D sound. It's amazing when you get into virtual reality. It's ambisonic or binaural audio. Not only do you hear sounds on the left and the right, but you can perceive or seem to perceive sounds above you and below you and behind you. And all these sounds can be tied to objects, individual objects within the game. So that's why we export these separately. I just give the creative team the idea of how this is going to sound up front. So at this point, when I'm happy with the sound design, I invite the creative team, our directors Bo and Adam, down and play it back for them. And typically there are notes. There are some things that people like and some things that they would change. And we work through that until everybody's happy. And I'm going to start reading again. So when they're happy, I start exporting these sounds individually, again turning off all the panning and all the effects, all the reverbs and delays. And then I label them carefully because we keep a database, a spreadsheet, very careful accounting of all the sounds that we have in the engine, since multiple people are working on them. And sometimes there are revisions too. It's important to have the sound accurately represented in the spreadsheet. So Katie, for example, will know exactly what she's got.
We have a question.
Good.
What was the hardest or toughest sound to create?
Wow. I think in the entire experience, we wanted to get that crow warp sound just right. It needed to have a game type quality to it, but also fold right into this fairly realistic environment we were using. And we had several rounds of the crow warp sound, and I think it ended up in a good place. It needed to be, it's a repetitive thing. It happens enough that I think it needs to be sufficiently creepy. It needs to put you in that place, but also needs to be something that you can hear over and over again and not get tired of. So yes, labeled, everything carefully labeled and entered into a spreadsheet. That's the end of the workflow really for me. I take all these sounds and make them available to Katie, and if there are no more questions at this point, I think We're about to take a break, go into an intermission, and Katie will describe taking these individual sounds and placing them in UE4. We'll be right back.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. My name's Katie Wood. I'm an interactive designer for Flight School Studio, and you might have heard my voice in Frank's part of the stream as a disembodied ghoul coming from the other room trying to read questions out. But now Frank will be the disembodied voice hiding in the shadows over here. So spooky with their whole theme of Manifest 99, right? So today, Frank and I decided to talk about the train approach sound that happens in the station. And that sound was unique in that we had it completely mixed together into one sound, as Frank probably mentioned in this portion earlier. And we did that for all kinds of reasons. For reasons on my end, it was just much easier to trigger one sound instead of triggering multiple little sounds at different times and having to get them precisely right. And so what we ended up doing in our pipeline was I would go in and record the train animation, actually record it in the game, approaching the station and coming to a stop, and then pass that footage on to Frank, and Frank would be able to time exactly right the start and the stop of the sound, how it ramped up, how it ramped down. So we were able to work together that way. And so that sound in particular, when implementing it in UE4, had a couple interesting things that I had to do to work around it. But today, specifically, is also a basic introduction or basic talk about just sound implementation in general in UE4. And so today, with the sound cue, which I'm going to be focusing on, we'll also want to show you exactly what we needed to achieve with the train approach sound. One was we needed it to sound like it was far away and then got really close. And the other, the second thing, is that we needed it to move with the train. So I'll show you that today. But to start, I'm going to go ahead, go into our content browser, and we're going to go and find the sound itself. So you see lots of sound folders, had a lot of little sounds here and there to give that ambience to the game. Go into train stopping. Okay, so to put a sound, just a basic sound wave, into UE4, what you need to do, there's a couple different ways you can go about it, but the most simple is to just grab the sound from a folder on your computer and drag it and plop it right in to UE4. And so that's exactly what this is. It's a sound train approach mix, a sound wave, dropped it in, and it created this asset. So if I open that up, you'll see that this is what it looks like. This is what a basic sound wave will look like. It has some settings that you can adjust, such as whether it's a looping sound, meaning it repeats over and over and over again, its volume multiplier, its pitch multiplier, etc. There's a few things you can do to edit it here in the sound wave itself. But actually found that putting that sound wave inside of another asset called a sound cue was much more effective. Now, sound cues can be used to affect the audio playback and the behavior of that audio playback for a sound. So sound cues are really handy. I've just always had a lot more success with them. They behave a bit better. You can put multiple sound waves into a sound cue, letting you play a lot of different things from it. So go ahead and show you. This is the original sound cue right here that I created based off of that sound wave, but I'll show you how I made that. You can right click, go up, and click Create Cue. You'll see right there it popped up suggesting a name. It wants to make it the same name that I have, but just adding a 1 on the end because there's already one version of that. And so created the sound cue. And I can go ahead and play it here, listen to that sound, or stop it and test it all out, but I'm going to go ahead and open it, show it to you. All right. So we're inside the sound cue now, and you'll see here, very, very simple. It looks exactly as if you've ever seen visual scripting or Blueprint at all. It's laid out with different nodes that connect to each other through pins, and so the sound cues take that same visual scripting style and utilize it themselves. And so here we have just the simple sound, the wave, that I could even, if wanted to, just drag in and plop it in if I had a different sound cue I wanted to add it to. But in this case, since I created it right off of the sound wave, it's already attached for me, and there's a pin dragged out from output going into this output node. And that's what plays the sound for me. So I can play it right there. I can play individual nodes as well to see how different things sound. And primarily, what would be awesome about a sound cue, and what is awesome about a sound cue, is that there's all these different sound nodes over here on the side, and these allow a lot of different variability of control that we can use to edit the sound in Engine. So if an audio engineer or someone who wants to, sounds that we've been given wants to come in and say, oh, you know what, this sound should be looping, just drag in a node, ba-bam, and you're able to drag off the output, put it in through looping, put it out through output, and there you go. Now the sound is going to be looping over and over and over again. Easy as that. But since we have it playing only one time, since it's train approach mix, generally we don't want that. And usually looping is only used with music because you don't really want your music to play, reach the end of the track, and then just stop. And that would be pretty bad. So in this case, we're all good. You can also edit the volume and pitch multiplier. And that's something to keep in mind, and something that has always been a little bit tricky for me, is that each of these values, you can see that we could edit the volume here in the sound wave itself, and the pitch as well. But we can also do that in the cue, and there are other places that you are prompted or that you can edit the volume and the pitch of sounds. And you have to keep in mind that these are multipliers. So if the sound is a 1 here, and I change it to 0.75, which it is by default here, then the volume of the sound is going to be 0.75. But if I have a lot of different instances where I'm fiddling with the volume, I could have a really loud sound and not remember the origin of where I adjusted the volume. So that's something to keep in the back of your head as you're editing it. Another thing, just briefly to touch on, are sound classes. They're a bit more advanced, but they're typically, for us, they were used as a categorization system. We were able to assign a different sound class to each of the different sound effects, and then you can reference a specific sound class and change it, edit it however you want, and then that will propagate down to the sounds with that sound class. So sound A and sound B have sound class master in this case. If I change the master class, A and B are going to be changed as well, and that really can come in handy. I think we used it a bit on sound effects versus music. When we wanted to mix the music real high, we would edit the music sound class. Mix the sound effect class, sound effects would go up or down. So that is the beauty of a sound cue and some of the things we used a sound cue for. But there are a couple other things that we wanted to do with this sound cue to get it to be just right for our purposes. One of them is that we wanted to attenuate the sound. So I'll go over here and show a sound, drag the sound into the world, make an instance of it. All right, there we go. You'll see there's all these other values on the side. I could play around with, let's see here, there we go. I could play around with pitch and volume again. The sound will auto-activate, which means it'll play immediately, and that's always something you gotta be careful of. All of a sudden a sound's playing, you didn't know what happened, but so here it is again. This is just an instance of that sound cue. So to attenuate a sound means exactly creating a sound that has a radius around it, that when I get closer to the source and get into that radius, within that radius, it will sound louder. And the farther I get away from that source and the farther I move out of that radius, the quieter it gets. And so that's what we need to do to solve the first little issue we had to do with the train approach sound that I mentioned in the beginning. We need to have that sound like it's far in the distance and then it's coming up right up on me, and it's going to be passing me even as it approaches. And so let's see here. To do that, you can do that in the sound cue, but you can also do it in this instance. You click Override Attenuation, you scroll down, and there are two values that are probably the big ones. Your radius and your fall off distance. So here, this small little sphere you see here is our radius. So that's where the sound will be the loudest, the core of the sound. And then we have the fall off distance. You'll see that's this big sphere, barely on the outskirts of it, right out here. And that will be, I won't hear the sound at all when I'm outside of it, but when I get closer and closer and closer to the source, and I'm inside that fall off distance radius, then I will actually start to hear the sound. And so that is extremely useful. And I think we use that quite a bit in all kinds of different sounds for Manifest 99. It was just really great to have something sound like it was coming from only one direction. So we've solved, oh, and also I should mention there are different types of attenuation. This has where there's an inner radius and an outer fall off distance, but you can also change it to look like capsule. And you can also change it to look, oh, I'm sorry, that was the capsule. Here we go. All right. It's a different shape, different boundary. And you can also change it to be a box if you want. Or, let's see what the last one, a cone, which is interesting. And those allow you to play around with the sound in different ways. If you don't want to have a sound with a spherical boundary, those are different options for you as well. So we've solved the first issue that we needed to with the train approach mix, and now we need to have the sound actually move with the train, because if we didn't do that, the sound would sound very far away, but then it would never get closer to us. It would just stay stationary as the train animation played and the train actually came at us. So to do that, it should be as simple as parenting this sound to the train, which is way out here. There we go. Boom. And to parent a sound, that's used, parenting, the term, is used across all different kinds of coding languages. But in this instance, it is exactly as it sounds. It's just sort of attaching a sound to the train, having a parent, in my imagination, drag their child around like Disney World by the hand. They're forced to follow the parent wherever they go. And it's more like inheritance, that the parent is giving their coordinates or location, their genetics, down to their child, and their child is inheriting that attribute from the parent. But here we are, let's see. To parent an object in the simplest way, you just can drag something and put it on top of another actor. And they have to be in the same level, but if you did that and let go, they would be attached to each other in their parent-child relationship now. But we had an interesting predicament with this sound and the way the levels were built with one another. So now you can see over here on the side in the levels, listing all the levels in the game, that there are 2 levels visible right now. And that is because we had a separate level for the train and another level for the environment. And we just loaded them on top of each other at the exact same time during play. And that was done because we thought it'd be much easier for development purposes. We would have a designer go and work on the train in a separate map, check it out in a certain software, work on it, and then another person could go into the environment level, check that out, and be completely separate. And so, let's see, here. But because of that, had a little bit of issue just simply putting the sound in the world. So it should be as simple as I go into the train station map, the actual one with the train, and then I put the sound on the train, like some of these sounds you see here, and we're good. We call it a day, and it'll play and load, and it should be happy. But it's not quite how it worked out. Because the sound auto-activates and it's perfectly timed, so it needs to auto-activate at the very beginning, it would get cut off when it was loaded into a different map. So there's probably a better explanation for this, but I imagine that there's this moment where both of them are loaded, the sound activates inside the train level, then they're loaded on top of each other within just infinitesimal seconds, and that sound gets cut off because it's already activated in the other level, not the one with both. And that may be wrong. That was a theory of mine. But no matter what happened, if I had just attached the sound to the train, I couldn't hear it. It wouldn't work at all. And at first couldn't figure out quite why, but then I realized that the sound would have to exist inside of the environment map and then be parented through scripting to the train. And so what we did, go ahead and open up sequence, the train arrive sequence, here we go. So we use Sequencer, which handles a lot of cinematic actions, and we use them a lot in Manifest 99. But for sound purposes, they're great because you can add audio tracks, you can add event tracks. You'll see all these different tracks right here. And these tracks fire off different things in a scripted order, much like a sequence. So, hence the name. But here, I could add any old sound, and that'd be great, but they wouldn't be attenuated. So I definitely needed to have an event call that sound in the world and say, hey, play right now, please. That'd be great. And then have another sound that said, or another event that said, hey, parent yourself to this train. So that's exactly what I ended up doing. I have one of these little event nodes on the event track. Go ahead and check out their properties here like that. But here you'll see parent train SFX, which is an event or function, and it exists inside of the level blueprint in the world itself, which is this overarching blueprint that executes in the entire environment. And that's where these events typically call and fire. They have to exist inside that level blueprint. And so when this event fires, it calls the parent train SFX event. Then it's going to go ahead and parent and attach that sound to this train. So let's see, open up that map. And we can look at it a little bit inside the blueprint. Boop. Okay. Oh, actually, I think it was inside. Let's see. It's inside the train blueprint itself, or the train map itself. Opening up. There we go. Okay. So it's inside of here that it actually parents it. So the sound had to exist inside of the environment level, but then once the train was loaded and the sequence was playing, it would then activate and call the level blueprint of the train map, and that would attach and parent the sound. So there we go. You'll see right here, get a reference to it, get a reference to that sound, and attach the actor to the back train car. And so parenting it would then attach the sound to the train, and it would drag that sound along with it and sound like it was actually getting closer. So that's what it did for this particular sound. A little bit of a workaround based on the way that it was created, different maps, and had to do that in a couple different places, but that was something that the sound effects just had to go through to get put in there perfectly. So also did a lot of animation sequencing, like putting sound effects on animations, and we can maybe talk about that at another time. I don't know if we have time for that, or if there are even questions. I don't know.
We had one question back during the break, which I think you've answered pretty well.
Oh, okay.
Matt was asking about placing sounds in the 360-degree space, and most of them in this are done that you did a really good job of explaining it. There are other sounds that are head-locked. If we had a narrator in this, for example, voiceover, and the score, I think, is in this category too, where the sounds are head-locked. They stay with your head as you move around, as opposed to being object-based like these sounds are. It's disorienting if the music changes depending on where your head is. So it's a lot better to have the score and a narrator that isn't part of the story be locked to your head position. Right. So there's that other kind of sound in this environment.
Yeah, exactly. We have ambient sounds as well for, like, wind and all kinds of other stuff blowing through that station, and that is just freely playing and looping in the background, and so it kind of sounds like it's all around you. It's not attached to a specific object like this sound needed to be. But okay, should we show any more? We good? Or
I think we've answered questions.
okay.
We thank everybody for watching today.
Yeah, thank you so much. Want to go ahead and wrap up and show the award that Frank mentioned earlier. We're so thankful to the Future of Storytelling for this lovely award. Comes with a little marble. See if you can see it. Had to show it off. There we go. All right. So please do not forget to purchase Manifest 99 for $5.99. It's available on PS4 in the North American region, Steam, 5-port, and Oculus. So, and also check out our blog on manifest99.com. So we'll be back another week. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.